Okay, let's get this going. Good afternoon, America. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader. I'm calling all the way in from Texas. He's recently moved to the United States from Australia. He's quickly become an outspoken critic on the corruption of child protective services and has been making his way all through the internet and the broadcasting circuit, speaking out about the corruption of child protective services. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're going to talk about here today. I've been writing a huge expose in my blog. I've been publishing a lot of stuff on my Meat and Potatoes YouTube channel. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Meat and Potatoes Show, Matthew Virgiin. Matthew, welcome to the show. Finally, good to talk to you. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me on. Apart from my medical condition that's recently made a reappearance, everything's going well.
Now, is this something that's been going on for a while, or has this just since you've come here? Is this something that's been going on?
I've had this for about 8 years now, so it's on and off.
Oh, man, God be with you. And here you are, you're fighting. You know, that's God provides. God gives you the strength, and God provides. So let's get right into this. And as you know, Matt, I've been obviously writing about CPS for some time now. You've been working in the field fighting it. And I've also been researching the drugging of our children. And, of course, now here in the United States, we have this thing called Common Core, which is being implemented. Now we're going to see a databasing of our children and our families, and not just what our children do in school, how they're performing, how their grades are, but it's going to actually database our private lives. And everybody knows this. And even though the people pushing this corruption, even they know that. But anyone who fights it or exposes it, I mean, they're called a government conspiracy nut or a kook, or oh, that person's crazy. Or it actually becomes another reason. Well, see, this is why we need to get involved in this family, because this person thinks it's a government conspiracy, and the evidence is overwhelming. Yet it can surges on. And Matthew, first question is: are these people just plain evil? I mean, what is going on with these people?
I think that. Well, it's hard to outright call people evil, you know, because obviously a lot of what's going on. It feels sort of World War II-ish again, doesn't it? Where you destroy the family, you destroy the country, and you destroy the values, and then you take over with a dictatorship. So when you say evil, it depends on who you're relating to. Like a lot of the soldiers on the side of Germany that fought in World War II, they weren't necessarily evil. They were just doing what their country asked them to do. So I just thought I'd like to tread very carefully who I'm calling evil and who I'm not. You know.
I don't have a problem with that. But you please keep going.
But when it comes to child protection services. You know, I'm a neutral party. I'm not here to say they're good. I'm not here to say they're bad. I'm here to say they need to do their damn job. And they need to do it right. And in some sense, a lot of the social workers being playing like evil because they're spiteful, they're relentless. You get one step ahead of them, and they'll turn around and make you pay for it for a very long time. You know, so a lot of these departments, I would say, are evil per se, and what they're doing is evil, but not necessarily every single one of them are evil.
No, and that's not what I'm implying. Unfortunately, though, as I've discovered in my writing and my research for the articles that I've been putting together, I can concur with what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying. I slightly disagree. I have never run into anybody or have ever heard any story, and all the research that I've been doing, and I myself have been involved with CPS ever since my first child was born. I know friends, neighbors, family, everyone who's been involved with them. The point I'm trying to make is I haven't heard one person actually say, oh, yes, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Oh, I was so grateful for them. Oh, thank God they came into our lives. Not one story. Not one story. Everything has always been about how they intrude on the family, they impose on the family, they have stolen children, All you got to do is just go to all the articles I've written. Those things have been researched and fact-checked over and over again. I've never heard any good stories, and I can understand where you're going, but please take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. I see what you're saying as well. Of course, no one's going to come forward and say thank you, CPS. But a classic example of them doing their job correctly was down here in Texas the other night. I actually posted the story on my Facebook page where the mother of a child wanted to hire a babysitter because she left her child in a hotel room. Babysitter showed up. Mother never came back.
Oh.
So Child Protection Services obviously had the child handed to them. The child is malnourished, not looked after. And this is they've done some digging on her, and apparently this is the second time that she's done this, the second time they've had to remove a child because of documented abuse and neglect. Now, obviously, this is definitely a case of neglect because she's left her child in the hotel room. But, of course, that mother's not going to come forward and say, hey, CPS did their job right and it's fantastic and everything, is she? She's on the run from the law at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I can understand that. Those are the situations where an organization like CPS is required. And that, if you were to narrow down the parameters of what their job is, that is what their job is. Their job is to rescue actual neglected and abused children. And there are countless stories. I mean, I'm sure we could get CPS people on here who could tell some of the most horrific stories. I'm concentrating on the corruption, and it's overwhelming. And as I've written, one of the things I've discovered is that, and I've used this before, I've used this analogy before in several situations. You know, there was a time when you could say, you know, if somebody was corrupt or something was corrupt or there was malfeasance going on, you could say, well, that's an isolated incident. It isn't really, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single person in the agency is like that. And there was a time when you could say that, and that would be true. Unfortunately, it seems like the reverse is true, where the actual incidences of where CPS is needed and have to do their job has now become the isolated incident. And now what we're seeing is we're seeing more and more corruption. We're seeing more and more families just having to go through hell just trying to explain themselves, even something as simple as just, you know, the child falls down and bumps their head. People are immediately assuming you've beaten your child, and you have to jump through all sorts of hoops to prove otherwise. It's like trying to prove a negative. That seems to be the more commonplace now. What do you think about that?
Definitely. That they take the wrong ones and they leave the right ones. You know, and the thing is that so many times they wrongfully take a child, and then they'll put them in a foster care home where the child's actually being abused, but they won't step in and do anything about it because they've already received what they set out for.
They've already done it. Yeah, I think of the Jeremiah Oliver case. It's happening right here in Massachusetts. And in fact, in Massachusetts alone, in foster care, there's something like 130 missing children in the state of Massachusetts that are under Child Protective Services care, put into foster homes, but for some reason they can't locate these children. They've either run away or they're missing, and I don't know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Last fiscal year in Tennessee, over 800 children died in foster care.
Yeah.
No, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, and here in Massachusetts there are problems where, and again, in all my research, I've come across several states where, once a child's in foster care, it's like, well, you're supposed to check up at least once a month or every 2 weeks. These things fall through the cracks all the time. And like you said, in Tennessee, 800 kids. I didn't even know that number existed. That's one of the states that I didn't bother to look through. Once I looked through about 8 states, I suddenly realized it's like, this is insidious. I mean, it's again, the isolated incident thing. If you could say, okay, one state that has a problem, 2 states that has a problem, but when you can start finding state after state after state, after a while, it's like, just stop looking. It's obviously. Go ahead.
Not just states of the United States. We're talking about other countries too, because I have people in the UK and Australia that I've been helping as well.
Now, let's get to that. I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit here on the outline, and we'll come back to it because you just mentioned it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Supposedly in the UK, there's just been some law passed down that there's, and I don't know if it's gone all the way through and become law, or whether it's been defeated. But there was some talk of, well, maybe we ought to assign social workers to every single family. So can you talk about that? See if that's true or not. That is, if you know anything about it.
I have no idea about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to look more into that. That recently just came down through the wire before this interview happened. But while I have you on the subject of what's going on in the UK and Australia, tell us about Australia because that's where you're from. Tell us about what that situation is like over there.
It's just as bad as what it is over here, except obviously on a smaller scale. Not that there's less corruption, but there's less population, and then to expand the corruption, I think there's let's see, I know what the population of Australia is. I think it's between 19 and 24 million people, compared to the 360 in the United States. But a small city it's compared to a US city, a city like Sydney that has a population of only several million, and there's thousands of people in a concentrated populace that have had their children wrongful education. If you go per head per capita, that's still an extremely large number.
Now, adoption agencies have been created under CPS. State Senator Nancy Schaefer, she exposed this in the state of Georgia. She and her husband, of course, paid for it with their lives. And do you know about the Nancy Schaefer story?
I most definitely do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, expand upon this and tell my audience what you know about this.
Well, basically what I've got out of Nancy Schaefer is she called them the powers to be. And she tried to, she wanted to expose CPS for what they are, did some digging, found out about the adoption incentive program and everything. And basically she spoke out about it, made herself a name. I actually know a couple of people that knew her personally. William Wagner is one, Neil Wilson is another. They both knew Nancy personally. And she, they found her dead. Pretty much.
Yeah, and they tried to rule it a murder-suicide, but yet nobody could corroborate that theory.
Well, as I said, William Wagner, I come to understand that he actually spoke to Nancy Schaefer the night before, or the night just before she was killed. So, and he stated that she didn't seem suicidal at all. She was level-headed and ready to keep going with what she was doing. And this isn't the first instance. Back in end of December, January, a judge was actually killed in Nevada, Judge Wallace. They found her on her laboratory with an apparent drug overdose with suicide because she her boyfriend dumped her because they couldn't be together because they were both serving on the bench or something ridiculous like that. And this woman once again was sound of mind. Had nothing wrong with loving fighting corruption, and the next thing you know, she's dead.
That's very interesting. Yeah, you can't. Well, whoever does this stuff, I mean, they're really, really good at it. They're really good at it because you and I could go around and around on this, and we could uncover evidence after evidence. It's very inconclusive. I know.
All I can say on the subject is them quite willing to go after people. I'm in Texas. If you want after me, you know my number.
Okay, really.
Location and come and get me.
Yeah, let's talk about the Adoption and Incentives Bill. And I've got one of your emails and some of the notes that you sent me. In 1997, Bill Clinton signed a bill called H.R. 867, called the Adoption Incentives Bill, What this means is that for every child adopted out of Child Protective Services around America receives a commission for every child they adopt out, and more if the child is disabled. Well, isn't that special? This has become an epidemic in the circles of Child Protective Services, and now it has gotten out of hand. They police themselves. They show up to people's houses without warrants or investigation. They accuse families of abuse, although even when finding there is no evidence, they still keep the case going. Expand upon this, please. What do you know about this? I've just found out.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know a lot about this.
Go ahead.
A lot of thinking on this.
Go ahead.
I sat down and obviously, if you're going to go into something like this, know thy enemy, as they say. And I know thy enemy very well. And it actually, funnily enough, this didn't start in America. It started in the UK. The adoption incentives, and as far as I can tell, it goes back to the early 1800s and just before, where orphanages were full of children, and obviously they didn't have any parents and that sort of thing because of the plague and everything else that ravaged through England out during those dark times, and then the Renaissance and everything. There was a lot of war and a lot of famine and a lot of poverty.
Certainly.
And so a lot of children were put into these orphanages. So what the orphanages started doing was they started selling the children to rich families.
Huh. Are you there?
And obviously over time it's just been developed and developed and developed into other countries. And as far as I can also tell, I know that Jimmy Carter in 1980 proposed a bill very much the same as Bill Clinton's. And that's what Bill Clinton built his off, was the one that Jimmy Carter proposed.
Now, when it comes to orphanages, and I covered some of this in one of the parts of the expose I wrote. Okay, I understand. These children are parentless. Not all the children were parentless. Sometimes situations were going on. You had just mentioned it before. There might have been a plague. There might have been a war. There might have been some economic problem going on where the families we can't afford to feed our children anymore. We can barely afford to feed ourselves. Things are going very badly. And there was an entire different economic paradigm in play back, in the 1800s and the turn of the century anyway, in Europe and in the United States. So not all of these children were parentless. But today, and as Nancy Schaefer exposed, this is just human trafficking now. They literally come in. There was even a piece from Alex Jones from InfoWars where he was speaking with Nancy Schaefer on the phone, and the two of them had talked about how even CPS in some states, they actually have a website. You can actually go to the websites, and you can literally see hundreds of pictures of children, and you can just pick and choose. Yeah. Now.
You want the links?
Yeah, exactly. If you want to,
I've seen them.
Yeah.
I found them myself, and they have videos. They have pictures. You can pick what race they are. You can pick whether they have a disability or not, what state they're in. It's a catalogue. It's basically a catalogue for human trafficking.
And not all of these children. This gets me back to the isolated incident, where this is no longer an isolated incident. Just like in the orphanages, not all of those children were parentless, yet those children were being stolen and sold off to families. Just as with CPS today, not all these children are quote-unquote neglected and abused. What I uncovered in my research is that the term at-risk, an at-risk child, in the 60s and the 70s, even way back, turn of the century, when the Department of Social Services was started under the 1935 Social Security Act, you had to pass a very serious litmus test in order for a child to be declared neglected or abused. Steadily as time went on, until we're at the point of today, the term at-risk child, the bar is so low now that quite literally you can deem practically any child in any circumstance as at risk. Do you own guns in your home? Your child is at risk. Are your parents divorced? Your child is at risk. Is there a relative, is your mother or your father terminally ill? Your child is at risk. What type of neighborhood do you live in? Your child is at risk. All of this. So what ends up happening is these people get under the purview of CPS, and then eventually they're at risk of being abducted by CPS. Am I correct on that?
That is 100% correct. And the thing is that, you know, child abuse and neglect is a criminal charge. That is a criminal charge. If I go out and I hurt a child, I get done with child abuse or neglect, child abuse, and then I also get done for assault.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this being heard in civil court and not criminal court then? If I'm being charged with child abuse or neglect, theoretically, it should be going to criminal court, not civil court, because that's a criminal charge.
Yes. What happens also when they bring it to a different court is, because I've experienced this and I uncovered it in my research. See, if you go to a criminal court, it might be a little different in Australia, but it technically is basically the same. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed this crime. And a jury of your peers must vote either unanimously or 9-4 or whatever the jury pool is. They have to vote either in the majority or unanimously that, yes, the state did prove its case and you are guilty of this crime. In a family court, none of that exists. Essentially what happens... It
doesn't apply.
Yeah, none of it applies. That's absolutely correct. You know, basically the state can come in, and what they do is they present their case. It's a series called a fact-finding. You know, you go back to court and they say, oh, well, this is under fact-finding hearing. But basically what that means is we just want to hear what the state has to say. And I have a friend of mine... Go ahead.
Sorry to interject, but there is something else here that a lot of people I've spoken to didn't really look into it, and that the United States Constitution doesn't apply to civil court. It only applies to criminal court. So if they come in and take your child without a warrant or prior investigation, you can't plead the Fourth Amendment because it doesn't apply.
That's absolutely true. I mean, you know, you come to an epiphany at some point in time, and I haven't come to this lightly, and I'm convinced that many lawmakers, many government agencies, social workers, law enforcement, judges, basically anybody in a position of power and authority. There was a Cornell University study just done a little while ago, and they came to the conclusion that 1 in 10 of these people are inherently psychotic. And one has to have almost a Napoleonic complex in order to actively and purposely seek out such a career choice. And I truly believe that the government wants to wield ultimate power over the citizens. In effect, make everything illegal. Now, if I'm mistaken in this assertion, then please explain to me why we see tens of thousands of pages of new regulations in America every year. Hell, it probably goes on in the UK and Australia also. And explain to me why we see more police brutality against citizens and the militarization of our police. Explain to me why you cannot point to one person who can aptly say, yes, CPS helped my family. Explain to me why we are fined if we do not sign up for Obamacare. And explain to me why Connecticut is demanding that people register their guns or be arrested. Explain all of this to me. If none of this stuff exists, and I am a complete conspiracy nut, then why does all of this stuff exist? And I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Why does what exist, sir?
Why does what?
I didn't quite catch that.
Well, why does, if everything, if we're supposed to be, it's just a conspiracy, you people are all conspiracy nuts, you're all crazy about that, well then explain to me why you see so much opposition and so much other research going on and so many opposing viewpoints and so many stories of people saying, no, these people are right, this stuff is actually going on. And I want you to expand on that.
Well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I deal in hard facts,
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, I'm just stretching a bit here. I deal in hard facts, and when it comes to CPS, then there is a lot of hard facts out there. The adoption incentive, it exists. It's there. So if there's an incentive for them to do what they're doing, then, of course they're going to be doing it. And as previously stated, and back on the incentive thing, it's not a conspiracy theory. It actually exists. I believe I did send you a copy of the bill. I actually have copies of the new bills that are coming in for this year. They're still going ahead with it.
Right. They always make the law harder and harder and tougher and tougher. These things never go away.
What they do is they terminate the parental rights. They get their incentive. They put the child in an abusive foster care, and they don't do anything about it because they've already got their money.
Have you ever?
That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a hard fact. Yeah. Otherwise, why would they themselves be reporting? Like every piece of information that I get on child protection services comes from them. If you can dig deep enough onto their website, if you go onto the Child Welfare Gateway website, you can find a lot of things on CPS.
What is it called? The Child Welfare Gateway?
I'm sorry?
Child Welfare Gateway?
Yes. What it is how it goes is that you've got your social worker. That social worker reports to her supervisor. That supervisor reports to a director. That director reports to the DHS. And in between, because it's all umbrellaed under the Department of Human Health and Services, which covers child protection services, it covers hospitals, doctors, schools. And in between there and CPS, there's a website called the Child Welfare Gateway. And that has all their legislation, it has all their rules and what they have to comply to, all their statutes. But then if you dig deep enough and you look around, you can find their financials as well.
I get it. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to look that up, and we'll, once I find that site and get it out, I'm going to post it up on the interview and on the Facebook page also.
And the other good thing about that website is, you want a real credible source of information, it actually has a live chat where you can sit down and talk to an employee from the Child Welfare Gateway. And last year I asked them for their what was the determination report. Can you give me a list of your statutes on terminations by state to state? And I turned around and said, look, I'm from Australia. I'm just doing a research project, to comparing the systems between Australia and America. I'm doing university over here. Just fed them a bunch of rubbish. And you know what? They gave it straight to me. They said, here you go. I still got the transcript of the conversation in my email.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Go straight to the source. You need information, go straight to the source.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Have you ever been targeted by Child Protective Services? And you can tell me it's none of my business, or, can you talk about it?
I haven't really told much people about my story because, I'm a very private person, and there's a lot of people out there that are online trolls and that, and they're targeting myself and several other people that I'm affiliated with, and, trying to drag us all down, obviously jealous of work, or I don't know why they do it. But, I never personally have been targeted by Child Protection Services, but there's two instances where in different parts of my life, now not many people know about this. I have not spoken about this to many people. So I guess it's sort of like an exclusive here.
That's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Last year, I think it was, end of 2012. My daughter's mother and I got into an argument, and she turned rather violent. And I don't want to go into details.
No, you don't have to.
I don't want her to get me for slander or anything. But I actually got into an instance where I needed Child Protection Services help, and they refused to do it. They refused to help me. And I didn't see my child for 4 months. She disappeared.
Unbelievable. I'm sorry to hear that. Has everything worked out? Has everything...
We keep it civil, you know. I never took her to court, you know, it's all
Certainly.
over now.
No, and
And
that's...
you know, she's a wonderful mother. I will not say anything bad about her now. You know, she has raised my daughter rather well. She just turned 2 last month, and I haven't seen her since I come from that. And a lot of people judge me, you know, how could you leave your child behind, leave her behind for others? But, you know, I needed CPS, and they weren't there for me. And that was not the first time. The first time was I grew up in a very, very bad childhood. Very bad childhood. And I used to hope that something would happen and take me out of it, but nothing ever did. And a lot of people knew the abuse that I and one of my sisters were going through. You know, I went to private school, they knew about it. My parents knew about it. My brother knew about it. My sisters knew about it. My grandmother knew about it. My aunt knew about it. You know, my aunt told me stories from when I was 2 that I don't even remember. And it's like, well, why didn't you do anything about it? Why would you let me go through that and not call someone about it? And to this day, I still carry my scars, you know.
Certainly. Oh, I would imagine. Sure.
You know, emotionally and physically. And a lot of people, they question me about, you know, why do you do this? Well, I believe that I was chosen by God to do this. You know, but the other thing is that I was one of the children that the system should have saved.
Yes. Bringing me back to what I said earlier about how, and I think what it is because the bar is so lowered now, I think they spend too much, an inordinate amount of time chasing down brush fires. You know, they see smoke somewhere, they think there's a fire. Meanwhile, the forest is burning down. Children like yourself and countless other children before you and after you, in desperate, dire need of the services, are not getting the help they need. I think it's because they're spending too much time chasing these brush fires. And I want to get into the structure of what happens when you go to family court. And thank you so much, Matt, for telling me that story. Thank you. You know, you didn't have to. I really, really appreciate that.
It's about, you know, some people know, some people don't, and it's probably the medication talking, to be honest. You know, I just, you know, I'm open and honest, and maybe it was about time to speak a little bit about myself so people can maybe relate that I'm not just someone who just randomly decided to do something.
Right, who's just spouting off. That's right. You have an actual legitimate experience with this. Now, I want to get into how the family courts are structured. And I wanted to finish by saying I've been involved with CPS. Since my 2 children are grown now, and I've got a 14-year-old daughter. And one of the things you've got to understand about CPS is once you're in the system, you never get out of the system. It never, ever goes away. In fact, this brings me back to what I said about at-risk children. What we have today is, back in the 80s and the 90s, you had children who were deemed at risk, and CPS was involved in their lives. These children are now grown now. They, of course, most likely have children of their own, and, of course, we all know that the whole structure of the family unit is completely fallen apart here in America. So this is like fresh meat for the grinder for CPS. It's like, oh, look at all these children, these out-of-wedlock children, these single mothers, these underage mothers that are having children. We've got to get these children into the system. Oh, look up so-and-so's name. Well, turns out she was what they call clients. She was a CPS client back in 1988 or 1995 or whatever. Well, now she's grown and had a child of her own. Well, we have to get them in the system. So this gerbil wheel just keeps on spinning and spinning. And when you get into the family court system, what you realize, and I mean quite literally when you arrive at court and you're standing outside of the courtroom waiting to go in, the guardian ad litems, the CPS agents, the social workers, even the lawyers, the so-called court-appointed lawyers, oh, I'm your court-appointed lawyer, and I'm here to look out for the child's well-being and that kind of thing. They're all in league with each other. You can actually see them. Let me finish the story because this is my personal experience. I've literally stood there outside the courtroom waiting to have my say in court. These people are all chit-chatting, drinking coffee, laughing and giggling to each other. They're all chit-chatting. And I personally watched them all do this, and then they all go into the courtroom, and then they proceed to screw over the family and screw over the defendant. Even the legal counsel assigned to you or the legal counsel assigned to your family is complicit in this. And please expand upon this, Matt.
Well, look at the name for starters. Court-appointed attorney, which means an attorney appointed to you by the court. So straight up, you can come to the realization or the epiphany that a court-appointed attorney is to serve in the best interest of the court, not the client.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of people say, oh, CPS isn't corrupt. They do a good job. They help people, and if people are very judgmental these days. It cost Charlie Sheen $500,000 last year with an attorney to get his children back. And the guy actually was on drugs and doing a lot of bad things, okay? Now, we're dealing with the lower-class American families that have no money. They are struggling to get by. They can barely pay their mortgage. And I know, I've seen this personally.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That people are struggling everywhere. And so how can they have any chance to fight the system? And that's why they get targeted. Because they cannot afford to fight the system.
And the funny thing is, again, I've uncovered this in my research, the majority of the families are lower income. You very rarely, if ever, see a wealthy family or a family of, means, maybe, $100,000 a year or $250,000 a year type of income. You rarely see that type of family involved in court because, as you just said, they can afford a lawyer. They can afford, and this is the other thing, they can afford such a good lawyer that the first thing that lawyer is going to do is get it out of the family court and bring it to a criminal court. And of course, once that happens, the CPS loses their case. But you're right. And again, this brings me back to the corruption. This brings me back to where I think these people are inherently evil, is that they prey on the lower income, they prey on the single mothers, they prey on the single fathers, they prey, these people should be ashamed of themselves, they prey on immigrants. Some families come in, when I'm standing outside in the courtroom, there's some families there, they need interpreters because they just don't speak English. Of course, their child speaks English, but for the family themselves, so these people are at an incredible disadvantage. I mean, and when they go into these fact-finding hearings, the family, I'm sorry to use this, the family is screwed over is what they are. They basically are.
Definitely.
So then why do you think this corruption exists? What do you think causes this? I mean, is it a lack of intelligence? It's money, right. I was going to say, is it a lack of intelligent people working in the system? Is it political favoritism?
No, it's money.
It's money. It's pure money. So it's greed. It's just pure greed. And here's the thing, the commissions that are paid for the adoption and the money that comes down through the agency, there's federal grants, there's block grants, there's the Title IV adoption incentive. I don't have all my notes in it, but there's a whole myriad of money that comes down through the system.
Yes, there is. And then also the foster family benefits too.
There's what benefits? What benefits?
Because they get a tax exemption. The person who adopts the child. Now this is where it gets really interesting. If they took my daughter and they placed her with a family, and it doesn't matter whether she's being abused, it doesn't matter what's going on, they will still turn around and demand that I pay that family child support or they'll put me in prison. And it's like, but you've just terminated my parental rights, which technically means, and I know this sounds harsh, please do not my parental rights of my child, then they are no longer my responsibility.
Yeah.
So why am I paying child support?
Yeah. Well, see, this is how government works. And I've got to say, this is how liberals think. This is how Democrats and liberals think. It's like what I call the abortion conundrum. It's like if a woman wants to have an abortion, the man, who is the other 50% of the equation, has no say in that. It's none of your business. It's not your decision. It's not your choice. If she wants to have an abortion, that's her choice. That's her decision. You stay out of it. Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Oh, but by the way, here's the bill for $350 or $550 for the abortion. It's like, wait a minute, you just told me that I have no say. You just told me that I have nothing to do with this. What am I doing with this bill here? They also do this in family court. They sent me a financial thing. You got to fill out this form. You got to, because you got to pay for the court costs. I'm not paying for these court costs. I didn't bring this on. This isn't my doing. You guys started this. You guys brought this on. You guys paid for this. And subsequently, getting back to the abortion thing, it's like, well, what if the woman suddenly decides, well, I don't want to have an abortion. I want to keep the baby. Well, now the father's financially obligated to take care of this child. It's like, wait a minute, 10 minutes ago you were ready to have an abortion. You told me I have no say. Now you want to have the child? Now suddenly I have to own up to my parental responsibilities? This is the oxymoron way of thinking that seems to pervade our society today, and it's really, really insane.
It's back to fun, and then it's twisted, and it's a cycle. It's just a continual cycle. And with what you said before, once you're in the system, you're always in the system. I know a family in Florida where there are 3 generations through the system. There's a gentleman over in Australia he's actually in office over there in New South Wales. He's 3rd generation stolen. They're called the stolen generation. And they just keep going and going and going and going and going. Oh, you have bad grandparents who taught your parents who must have taught you, so therefore you're bad parents and I'm going to take your children. It's teaching the next generation that stealing is right.
Right. The other thing...
If you don't do the... I've heard people that have had CPS used on them as a weapon by either jealous neighbours, envious friends, and then also I came across a case where even the child called CPS on their parents because they took away something from them by being abused and neglected.
They took my toys away, that kind of thing, right? In my research, there's an organization called Fathers Against Divorce Discrimination, and on their website, one of their little factoids that they have there is throughout the United States, anywhere from 55 to 65% of all 51A filings, and a 51A is basically an abuse and neglect filing, are false. They're completely false, and they're based on exactly what you just said: a revenge case, a divorce. I know about social workers ringing the hotline to give them anonymous tips to start up an investigation. Yeah, what they call the snitch network. Yeah, the 1-800 snitch network. Yeah, just call up. Yeah, and here's the thing. It brings us back to what we said about criminal court versus family court. I mean, again, there was a time where if you went even to the police station and said, I think something's going on, the cops would laugh you out of the police station. It's like, we can't go on a supposition or a hunch. You got to come back with some evidence. You got to come back with some sort of proof. Then we'll investigate it. But that's not the case with Child Protective Services. All you have to do is just call the hotline, and the ball is rolling. Don't have to leave your name. Don't have to leave your number. It doesn't even have to be the truth. The ball is already rolling.
Oh, yeah, a lot of it is just he said, she said.
He said, she said, that's right. Now, and getting back to what you said about, that what the child learns from growing up under the system, there was, and it's in my blog, there's a watchdog group that looks out for all of this, and again, I'll post up the website on the interview, and basically what this one researcher discovered is that when you have children growing up in the CPS system and growing up under government care, several things happen. What they lose is something that's very dear to somebody like me and dear to a lot of Americans, is they lose their sovereignty. They lose their sense of independence. They lose their sense of, I'm the person in charge of my life. Nobody else makes decisions for me. I am the determiner of my own path in life. What these children end up growing up learning is, where's my free check? Where's my money at the end of the month coming from the government? Where's my free housing? Always referring, even when they have children and send them to school, see, a parent like me says to the school, no, I don't want my child to be involved in that. No, I don't want my child learning that, and I want to be kept informed of everything that's going on with my child. Whereas these parents would be like, oh, no, the school knows best. Let the school indoctrinate our children. They grow up with this sense of, well, the government is taking care of everything, so why should I do anything? They grow up with this, don't they?
Well, I mean, it's not just the school as well. Like, last week I actually came around, someone tagged me in a post from a contact of mine tagged me in a post. And I looked at it. A doctor called CPS on a family because they refused to get their child immunized here in Texas. And it's like, the law of Texas says that you don't have to have your child immunized. Well, obviously that doctor wanted the money, so they turned around and called CPS on it for a cold store. And now CPS is looking at terminating the parental rights on Monday. They just got the letter 3 days ago.
All because yeah, really. And one of I'll tell you, I almost ran into that. Luckily, I have a good doctor, a good family practitioner, and my children. I've always purposely sought out really good doctors, and I've gotten rid of doctors who think like that doctor does. Yeah, everybody wanted to give my daughter the flu vaccine. It took me like at least 2 years to finally relent. But luckily, the doctors that I had were intelligent, and I explained to them why I didn't have, like, look, there's just so much going on about how the flu vaccine is actually giving people the flu. There have been reports of children dying, elderly people dying from it. It's not safe. Luckily, I had doctors that said, Mr. Mader, I absolutely understand what you're saying, and if you feel that she doesn't have to have this, that's fine. We can, she's fine, and she doesn't have the flu, well, then that's fine. And, we'll discuss it next time she comes in for her next checkup. And they were very, very nice about that. But that story that you just said does not surprise me, because I've had other doctors watching my children. And this one doctor, I don't care saying her name, Dr. Elsa Lee, she's out in Northborough, Massachusetts. We were in the middle of moving from one town to the other town, and my daughter had her checkup 6 or 8 months before, and we ended up moving to another town, and we transferred the records over to the other town and to the other school and stuff, and then she started attending school, and then I changed doctors, and I had made an appointment for my daughter to go back in. And then what had ended up happening is we got a letter from this other Dr. Elsa Lee, and she's like, oh, it's time for so-and-so's, checkup. I got on the phone and told her, no, we've moved to another town, and, we're going to do this over here. And she's like, well, she has to go in for her checkup, You're already a month late. I was like, okay, so we're a month late. We were moving. We started a new school. Don't worry about it. I've already got the ball in play. Well, she needs to be seen by somebody, and I need to get a phone call from the new doctor, or I'm going to report you. And I was like, really? Seriously? Are you serious about that? So I got rid of that doctor, obviously. But that doesn't surprise me. That story doesn't surprise me. What I want to ask you next is, what advocacy groups exist that actually work defending families and fighting CPS and getting to the bottom of this? There are tons of sites that I went to get information from. I was a little woeful in finding actual advocacy groups that work, nonprofit organizations that work to defend families. And I was wondering if you know of any.
There's a few out there, but the funny thing is we've contacted most of them, and none of them reply or respond. So either they're gone out of action, or the people that were with them have left, or there was the one I'm with, I was with, and then obviously there's several others I've been affiliated with, and I haven't spoken to them to mention their names, and I don't want to just throw any organization's name out there and then someone go to them and say, hey, you know, this person said contact you, and they turn around and they say, hey, we don't do that anymore, or we don't have the people or the resources or anything like that. But a lot of child advocacy groups out there that aren't non-for-profit, they're actually run by CPS themselves. Yes. That's how far the corruption goes. You know, they set up their own groups.
Yeah, I know of one personally. I know of one personally. No, I have no problem. I have no problem because it's my radio show, and these people are public people, and they've already put themselves in the firing line. One of the persons is an organization called CASA in Worcester County, Massachusetts, and the director there is, he's the case supervisor, Jim Steele. These people are guardian ad litems and child advocates. You know, they're here, they're court appointed to look after the welfare of the children. These people are a bunch of lying bastards, and they'll just stab you in the back. It's like the question I asked you earlier about how they all stand outside the courtroom chit-chatting and drinking coffee, and then they go in and they go to screw over the family. So there's one there. And again, I'll post the site. I'll even put the guy's email up because this guy's a lying bastard, and I don't really care. Go ahead, sue me. You know, I'm poor. I don't own anything. What are you going to steal? My radio, my equipment here? Fine, I'll just go to Radio Shack and buy some more. So last question.
I would be very careful with what you say. I know. Here in Texas that's being sued for their children by CPS.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. I don't care. I'm so angry with how these people have treated me that they've got to be exposed. They've got to be exposed for who they are. And I understand that there could be some retaliation, but you can't. When it comes to the future of this country and the future of our children, you've got to fight this. And the sad thing is that this has been going on not only for decades, but I mean it's reaching to the point where it's centuries old. I mean we're now into. I mean, it started in the late 1800s. I mean, orphanages were big in the 1800s and the 1700s. And then once the whole government got involved in it and started taking over, it's been in an inexorable downward spiral, and it's got to be exposed. So the last question: as Common Core gets implemented and Obamacare takes over, I mean, how insidious will the power of CPS become? And can we see a time? Can we see a time where basically social workers are involved in basically everybody's life?
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
We touched base on Title IV funding. Well, last year, if you read the Medicaid bill, there's Title V funding now. And what that is basically there's a list of stereotypes or a list of people that they have. And from the list, you know, there's people who are in the armed forces, there's people who don't vaccinate their children, there's people who smoke tobacco, there's parents who are under the age of 21, and then there's a couple more that I can't remember off the top of my head. And what that basically is that demographic of people. CPS or a social worker can come and investigate them whenever they want, walk in without a warrant, without any prior knowledge. Obama has just given these people unlimited power.
Sure they have. Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's sad. It's really sad. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'd love to have you on again if you're up to it. We can plan something later on, maybe next month or into June. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Virgiin calling in from Texas. Matthew, do you want to give information to any organizations you're working on, a website or something? Go right ahead.
Just through my Facebook and my email at the moment is the best way to contact me because I'm in the process of moving over to another organization. So.
Okay, good. And that'll all be on.
Nothing's up and running yet, so hopefully over the next week it'll.
Sure, and I'll put that information onto the video, and everybody knows they can just go to the Meat and Potatoes Facebook page. There's all the links there, and we're constantly chatting all the time, and you're posting stuff, and, you know, between the other organization, Americans United Against Tyranny, I mean, you're on that all the time. And
that's where I'm being incorporated into. So.
Oh, excellent. And I'll put that up. That's on my page. Matthew, thank you so much. Get some rest, my good friend, and we will talk again. Thank you so much, sir.
thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You have a good afternoon, Matt. See you later.
All right, catch up.
Great. Great. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much. He made a good point about be careful. Yes, I'll be careful. But you need to understand something. In journalism and reporting, you don't necessarily need somebody's permission to mention their name. If somebody is a public figure, if somebody is involved in an organization, especially a so-called nonprofit organization, this is a taxpayer-funded organization. Therefore, they are a public figure. You have every right to talk about that person, especially if you are in conversation with that person. You don't need to say, well, can I use that as information on me? Can I use that on the show? You don't need to do that. A private citizen, like say I was talking to the guy next door and I mentioned his name because he said something, then I could get in trouble because that's a private conversation between another private individual. The conversations I have with this man, Jim Steele from CASA organization, again, he's a public figure. He's having these conversations openly and publicly, and he's discussing things with other. I'm not discussing other cases that he's working on and other people's private situations. I'm simply talking about my situation. And he does this openly in the courtroom. I can get transcripts from the court. I have emails from him. I have the CASA report itself in my email. So all of this is public knowledge. It's out there. And I don't need to have the man's permission to mention his name or to speak to him about the way I am because my show is a purely editorial, opinion-based show. So, Matthew, again, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Mader, The Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk, and Awesome Rock. See you later.